All right, thank you. Section 512 is the carbon fee. As we talked about, this serves as one of the clawbacks for the American Union Jobs Program by putting a carbon fee and on pollution. Again, we're creating an economic disincentive for people to pollute our environment. This comes from model legislation HR 2307, which has been championed by the Citizens Climate Lobby, a grassroots organization around the country that is concerned about our environment and trying to find ways to impact and correct some of the issues that are developing. And so according to there's a lot of good resources on their website. According to their information, producing a gallon of gasoline emits 5 pounds of carbon dioxide, and then burning that gallon of gasoline emits another 19 pounds of carbon dioxide. So that's 24 pounds of carbon dioxide for each gallon of gas that we burn. And so the carbon fee in this legislation would create an economic incentive to use less gasoline. And for every $10 per metric ton, it would add about 11 cents to the price of a gallon of gasoline. In addition, many other carbon intensive products, again, will look for ways to use less of them and do less harm to the environment, while at the same time returning those fees back to the American people, to offset those higher costs. This isn't exactly based on the Citizen Climate Lobby on their model legislation, but under their proposal, they found that 2/3 of American families would be better off, would be net beneficiaries under the carbon fee and dividend program. Of course, with our American Union Jobs Program, every American will be a beneficiary to offset their higher costs. The other important reasons to use the fee and dividend model is to kind of avoid the tragedy of the commons, the way that pollution just sort of shifts external costs onto others. A good, clean, healthy environment is essential to our quality of life. And Citizens Climate Lobby estimates that implementing a carbon fee and dividend will prevent more than 230,000 premature deaths over 20 years as a result of the improved air quality. I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll look at chapter 102. All right, so section 512 adds a new subtitle to the Internal Revenue Code. Chapter 101 is the pollution fees, and chapter 102 is the carbon border fee adjustment. And chapter 101 got 6 different sections in here. The first one is definitions. It's pretty usual, pretty straightforward stuff. Carbon dioxide equivalent, or CO2e. Different greenhouse gases are measured in different ways, but for simplicity's sake, they would be translated into carbon dioxide equivalents, and then the tax will be figured on the carbon, what the equivalent amount of carbon would be. Identify what are some carbon intensive products. Basic ones are iron, steel, aluminum, cement, glass, pulp, paper, chemicals, and industrial ceramics. And these will be covered, these will be addressed when it comes to international trade. Covered entity that the carbon fee will apply to. In the case of crude oil, this is a refinery or any importer. Coal, it's the coal miner or the importer, and in natural gas, again, it's adding the gas to the natural gas transmission system or importer. And as we'll get to later in section 9906, administrative rules will be set up in a way to minimize the administrative burdens by applying the carbon tax as early in the process as possible, rather than having it distributed out among different entities. These are all basic definitions, no real surprises. Section 9902 is where we get the actual carbon fee. There is hereby imposed a carbon fee on any covered entities emitting use or sale or transfer for an emitting use of any covered fuel. Subsection C sets the carbon fee rate starting at $20 per metric ton for the calendar year 2023, and actually go in effect until near the end of calendar year 2023, but that'd be the starting rate. And then for calendar years thereafter, it would be an additional $10. And that $10 would also be adjusted for inflation in paragraph 3. And so it'll be adjusted for inflation, however much inflation is, the prices have gone up. That's calendar year 2022, to make sure that $10 increase is still a relevant increase. Section 9902 in the model legislation included some exemptions for the armed forces. Now, as you probably heard us talk about in previous sections, the United States military is the largest single consumer of fossil fuels on the planet. And so there was the thought of, well, maybe if we don't, it'll be better for the military if they don't have to pay the same carbon fee as everyone else does. They're the largest single producer of greenhouse gases. And so if we want to get serious about addressing climate change, to address the largest producer of the greenhouse gases. And so this legislation does not include that exemption for the U.S. military. Section 9903 is the targets for the emission reduction schedule. We use 2018 as the reference year, and then use that to set targets going down to the middle of the century. And Section 9904 sets the sunset in place so that when we do hit these targets over time, that this program will go away, that we'll have succeeded in reducing emissions from greenhouse gases to 10% of the target of what they were in 2010. And then this program will go away. Section 9905 deals with carbon capture and sequestration. So if we can capture the carbon as opposed to letting it become a greenhouse gas, then that would count as a credit or an offset for other carbon that is being produced. As introduced, this legislation, 2307, had an exception for turning oil into plastic. But as I think we'll probably talk about in the plastic section, a lot of America's plastic goes, over to Asia, where it's frequently burned as a source of energy. And so we've removed the exception for capturing carbon by turning it into plastic, which has its own set of environmental problems. 9906 is the administrative authority. It's the standard stuff of what exactly they should be doing. Minimizing administrative burden, identifying who the entities are that are going to be liable for this tax, requiring monthly payments to make sure that nothing's getting taxed more than once, and making sure that the domestic implementation of the carbon fee coordinates with the carbon border fee that we'll talk about in Chapter 102. And so I think that covers my testimony for Chapter 101, and be happy to answer any questions so far.
Yeah. Won't this raise less and less revenue over time?
Yes. So the price per metric ton is up, but as we pollute less and less, then yes, revenue will come down. It's not a sustainable model for funding, universal basic income or anything like that, because the point of the carbon tax is to change the economic incentives and get rid of the incentive to pass your pollution costs on to everyone else by making sure that the people who inflict that pollution have to pay for it. So yes, it will go down over time, and Section 9904 has the sunset part, so that when we hit our targets, it'll go away completely.
That's a question about that sunset. What is the purpose of having a sunset clause in the first place? Like, why does the program need to end?
Because we'll hit our targets. We'll have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions to less than 10% of what they were in 2010.
But we wouldn't want to go further?
I don't know. Again, this is based on the model legislation that includes that phase out when the targets are reached. I guess, when it comes to pollution, the earth can handle so much of it. And obviously we are overburdening our atmosphere with the amount of pollution that we're turning out. It's not my area of expertise, but perhaps when we do get down to 1/10 of what we were polluting in 2010, that will be in Earth's normal tolerances for how much pollution we can handle. Sorry, I don't know if that's the best answer I have right now.
Okay. And another follow-up, you said pollution, and this was something else I wanted to ask about. We're talking about carbon, we're going to be talking about plastic, which are kind of the biggest sources of pollution, most likely. But what about does this apply to other sources of pollution, say like polluting a local river or other water sources or any other kind of environmental pollution?
So it applies to greenhouse gases. So less, not so much polluting water as much as polluting the atmosphere with greenhouse gases. Yes, all the greenhouse gases are included at their carbon equivalents. So methane and other things like that, when those are produced by various industries, they will pay the carbon equivalent carbon fee.
Okay, and then just one last question. Will this lead to an increase in prices at the gas pump for regular citizens?
It will, yes. I mentioned at the beginning, gasoline contributes to, we said 24 pounds of into the atmosphere, and so that accumulates. And so for each $10 per metric ton, we should expect the price of gas to go up about 11 cents. Yes.